Welcome to Email After Hours by SenderScore, powered by Validity.
We're your hosts. My name is Guy Hansen.
And I'm Danielle Gallant, and this is Email After Hours. In today's episode, we are unpacking the intricacies of email testing, and we mean thorough testing. We are moving beyond the basic A/B splits to explore more holistic methodologies that yield truly meaningful insights. So we'll be digging into how marketers can avoid the common pitfalls of maybe outdated testing practices and how to set up tests that drive long-term results.
That's right. And joining us today is Kath, a renowned expert in email marketing, testing, and deliverability with over 2 decades of experience. Kath has written, spoken, and trained on nearly every topic in the email space, and her expertise in crafting persuasive copy, using AI for hypothesis generation, and rethinking testing strategies is pretty much unmatched. She's here to share how you can raise your game and use testing to get your campaigns firing on all cylinders. Welcome to the show, Kath. It's so great to have you here on Email After Hours with myself and Danielle.
Well, thank you both for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here. I've been a long-term fan and follower.
So if you could rewind to 2004 and compare the email ecosystem to what it is now in 2024, what's the biggest difference, or maybe would have been the most pivotal changes?
Gee, I don't know if I can designate just one, but I would say definitely deliverability, right? Completely chalk and cheeks. Segmentation, personalization, also, back then it was literally batch and blast. And I think also we are becoming more customer-centric. Whereas again, it was all about the brand. Just we need to sell this, so we're pushing this out. I would say they're probably the 3 key ones.
I'm glad to know I've been harping on all the right things then.
But sort of starting off today's conversation, I'm going to bet that every email marketer is familiar with A/B testing and perhaps even multivariate testing. But you've been a passionate advocate for holistic testing, which goes far beyond those other principles, almost so much so that you've even named your business after the principle. So what does holistic testing look like in practice, and what makes it different from traditional A/B testing?
So let's get this straight. I don't believe that in email marketing, the majority of us are doing it right in the first place. We're doing what I would call ad hoc testing. No hypothesis, no retesting, no repeatable tests, using wrong metrics, all the rest of it. Holistic, of course, corrects all of that. So we use hypothesis, we do meaningful tests using meaningful success metrics. We go beyond that 10-10-80 split, which really can only be used with open rates. Any other metric needs a longer period of time to settle in. So beyond all of that, and there's a lot more differences as well, it also gives you the ability to be testing not just for the immediate uplift, right? But it tests for beyond, for learnings, for insights. And those learnings and insights enable us to actually go and hand them to one of our other channels and say, hey guys, we've found this. It's really interesting. Do you think that this would be a good thing for you to test and see if it's appropriate within your channel? So whether it's paid media, whether it's Google Ads, whether it's social media or anything like this, or landing pages, because a lot of what we do within holistic testing is really going beyond that, the factor testing. Should we do a red call to action or a blue call to action? And a subtle little word change. So we're looking for those more meaningful results, including motivations, using behavioral science and psychology, and really finding out what makes our audiences tick. What motivates them? So that's really where it comes at.
So that's awesome. And I think you've covered all of the core principles of holistic testing, and we're going to dig into each of those in a bit more detail over the next few minutes. But like many things in life, you've got to start somewhere. So in your experience, what's the first step marketers need to take to make that move beyond basic testing?
Do you know what? I'm going to say something that might sound a bit corny, but it's true. So in all my years of speaking and teaching, whether it's in a public course or whether it's an in-house client or course or whatever, the one thing that I have found that makes the big difference, that makes the change, is their enthusiasm. And their enthusiasm stems from the realization that they can start to learn more about their audience. They can start to find out what resonates with them. They can start to actually, because this has major impacts. It can be impacting your product offering, your sales offering, everything. So they start to get excited. So that enthusiasm, that passion, that excitement is one of the things that I think is a key factor for just initiating change. And then everything else follow.
I don't think that's a corny answer. I love that answer because I feel like it's the same thing on the deliverability front. No, we just want to get something out the door. No, we don't really care. We're going to blow past it. We're going to ignore this block listing, whatever it might be. But having that like curiosity and that enthusiasm. So I love it. Now, obviously, there are things that we need to set the stage, right, for more meaningful tests. And I find that often there are some commonalities in what marketers tend to overlook when they approach testing or even changing the way that they test. What do you find are the most common things that marketers are overlooking?
One of the most common one is not using a hypothesis, right? It's just because, and they've almost dumbed it down and simplified it to the point where all we ever do is subject line test. And all we're going to do is let's try A versus B. And sometimes it'll be a big change and other times it'll be a small change. And it's really just looking at the phraseology being used, maybe the order of the words, flipping them around, whatever the story is. And that is a big mistake. Second one that I would say is huge, probably on par, is using the wrong success metric. So testing for the wrong factor. Again, going back to subject lines, we tend to go with the open rate because it's logical. But if you were to, and you can do this easily, it's what I call the litmus test, right? If you were to go in and look at your, say, pull out the last 10 campaigns based on the highest open rates of your subject line, of your campaigns, then the next one on your click-through rates. So you do the same, 10, 20 campaigns or whatever for the same period. Then you go and pull out the same period, the 10 or 20 campaigns that you want based on conversions, and you're going to find there's very little overlap. So looking at those facts, then you are actually basing everything on your optimization of your campaign, of your program, everything, your learnings, your insights based on the open rate, then you're probably doing your business a disservice because you're optimizing for the wrong metric. And so this is where things get a bit scary.
I think those are some really great points. I think it also sort of overlaps with my next thought because we often find in conversations with senders that their testing practices are often a bit outdated, especially given that, email continues to change, new industry standards, new best practices, new laws. Do you find that? What are the sort of most entrenched misconceptions that marketers hold on to when we're talking about testing, and why do they continue to prevail?
Yes. So that answer is actually really easy. It's because we've never been taught how to do it properly in the first place, right? We have the email channel itself. Most email marketers have not been taught how to test scientifically. They've been taught to test by their email service provider, which provides them with it originated with an A/B split subject line test tool based on open rates. And then suddenly a couple of ESPs threw in click rates. Ooh, how exciting, right? But no hypothesis, no teaching, no learning, no anything like that. If you go and do a search for testing, out of all the percentage of learnings, insights, documents, teachings, everything within the industry, A/B testing has got like the least. There is a huge problem here. There really is. That's why we've got disconnect. That's why everyone basically is trying to test. And I do know, and I'm not saying it's the market's fault. The marketers are legitimately trying to test. They're doing what they've been told to do. And also, out of that percentage of the articles out there, most of them are telling you the wrong thing, right? So it's misinformation, it's just bad information. So essentially, the marketers are trying their best to do the tests, but they're doing it wrong because of that bad teaching. And then because they're doing it wrong, they get disillusioned. Because they get disillusioned, they stop testing, and then that's it.
And then we're back to 2004 with the batch and blast, and we just kind of let her rip.
It's a doom loop.
Yeah, exactly. But let's talk about the hypothesis, right? You've mentioned it a couple of times now. An experiment presumably requires a hypothesis. I mean, that sounds fairly standard, but hypotheses can get a little bit complicated or muddied when it comes to email. And I think even part of it for me, I'm imagining myself in the marketer's shoes, and there are just so many variables and data points. I feel like I would be overwhelmed about even where to start. So could you walk us through how you approach crafting a strong hypothesis for an email test? Like, what strategies do you use to help shape what that hypothesis looks like?
So it's a great question. And what I would start with is that curiosity factor. All right. So I would say, what is it that I want to know? And you know your audience to a certain extent. You know the product, you know your brand. So start to question. Start to say, I wonder what if. Then you can go and look at the data points. You can go and do some analysis. And you can go and say, oh, actually, yeah, this is true. You might get your winner or not get your winner, but then something springs up from the results and you go, that's food for thought for another hypothesis. So there's a whole heap of different ways of doing it. So I would essentially just brainstorm. This is what I do with my clients. When we first get together, I do an audit, so I know their programs inside and out. I understand their missed opportunities. I look at their campaigns. I know their objectives, what their goals are, where they want to go. I put all of that together, and then I just brainstorm a whole heap of hypotheses. I won't formulate them fully, but they'll be just really, succinct. And then, I used to, until Gen AI came along, my hypothesis. And generally, if it's a really basic one, the more complex they are, I just go and ask my Gen AI tool his name's Chad. I've trained him very, very well. So he and we barely need to talk. Seriously, he's got it. he can be. And so he comes up with some great hypotheses, particularly when they do get a little bit convoluted. But I wouldn't be going for convoluted if you're first starting out. Just do basic, just to really, really simple.
You've preempted and answered my next question, which was about how you go about re-educating like a customer centers. But just as a note for all of the marketers listening, you know how it's like kind of popular now to wake up and write your like gratitude pages. I don't do it, but it's what TikTok is telling people to do. For marketers, go ahead and write, I wonder if, and then like a couple things every morning. It sounds like that's the way we move forward.
I was just sitting here reminding myself that the square of the hypothesis is equal to the sum of the square of the other two sides. And then, of course, that's hypotenuse, that's Pythagoras. But anyway, I digress. So you've really touched on AI, especially handy it is for constructing, testing hypotheses. What else? AI is everywhere. How else is it transforming the way we're approaching email marketing testing?
So I do believe that in the not too distant future, it's going to massively change it. And I say that because there are some existing tools out there, or there's at least one I know about. There's one that was around 5 years ago, but you know how companies get bought out, and then that tool that was available for everyone is no longer available for everyone. That's why tool was an awesome tool, and it was using AI, and you could really, really get some meaningful results by doing it. But anyhow, so I do believe that is around the corner. But in the meantime, what I use it for is varied. So yes, hypothesis, writing the copy, particularly if we're talking about, and I've gone and done a couple of presentations and articles on this recently also about using the behavioral science, cognitive biases. It's always going to give you the first version, right? So the first draft. It's not going to be the end result. I use it also for splitting the data because we do 50-50 tests. And you need to have the data so that you can't just get a list and then cut it in half. It can't be like that. So it will go and prepare the data for you. I use it sometimes for analysis as well. And not because I can't read the results, but because sometimes it can read more into it and it can be questioning, particularly if you give it a really solid brief and it understands past history, past campaigns, and everything as well. So you can start doing that. And then, of course, because we're doing holistic testing, at the very end, I just say, hey, listen, Chad, give me some ideas of how we can now go and implement or go about using these insights within email, within social, within the landing page, and everything. And he just goes and comes out with a whole of these wonderful ways that we can be doing it. Of course, all of this stuff I used to do, I have done, I can do, but it makes life easier. So that's what I'm doing at the moment with Chad.
I think you've also given us a brand new icebreaker question for all of our future interviews, which is, what would you name your AI buddy who's going to help you with all of your email marketing needs? So noted. You mentioned before that there are ESP tools, like kind of out of the box mechanisms that marketers can leverage to perform testing, right? Often that's A/B testing. So for example, ESPs will determine a quote unquote winner or a version winner based on whether A or version B gets more opens most quickly. But again, you've advocated for testing with a longer lens, right? A longer term view. So what are some common traps that marketers fall into when they focus on those short term metrics? How can they start to look back at some of those long tail results?
So one of the main ones is, like I said previously, if you're using open rate to determine the success of to qualify your winner, you could, unless you're a publisher and you're rewarded on opens, right? If at the end of the day that campaign is actually selling something, or it's got bums on seats or downloads or something like that, you could be optimizing it wrongly. Okay. And that, I think, is a huge motivation once people clue on that that is the case. So what you need to do is just, if I go back to how it works, okay, so with inverse pyramid, we're going to get the most people opening up. And that's why everyone loves the open rate, because the majority, so it's easier to achieve statistical significance. Then we've got the click-through rate. So in the middle there, right, we've got the click-through rate. We've got fewer people, but you can still, if your sample size is big enough, you can still achieve statistical significance fairly easily. Then we've got the conversion rate. The conversion rate is obviously a lot smaller, right? And it's at the very bottom of the inverse pyramid. And so what that means is that it's harder to achieve statistical significance for, which means you really have to make sure that you've got the right sample size, the right, amount of data that you're using within that test. And not only that, the click-through rate and the conversion rate, they happen at a longer period than the open rates. The 10, 10, 80, which tends to be the natural with the ESPs, is perfect for testing subject line using open rates, because give it a couple of hours and you've got enough open rates there to actually be able to designate who the winner is based on open rates. But click-through, you're not going to get the winner. You're not going to get a statistically confident one, because not everyone, clicks take longer to come through. Right? They might open it, they might see it, but they might save it for later. I'm going to sit down and read that article. I want to register for that, but I haven't got the time yet. I'll save it for later, whatever the story is, right? And also lots of analysis, and you can do this in your own data as well. We tend to have fans. Each brand has its fan base, and they're the ones that are going to be first opening, but they mightn't be actioning it. They mightn't be buying it. They just really love to see your products. They love to read what you're saying, whatever the story is. So they're not the right people to be basing a decision on, particularly when we're talking about things like conversions, because they're loyal whatever you do. So they're going to be opening regardless of what version you're going to send to them. Whereas when we're talking about conversions, that needs a longer period, an absolutely longer period. Now, so for us, when we're doing ours for holistic, we will wait 7 days. Now, I had a client who used to just report, because they were sending a campaign every 4 days. So they would report every 4 days. They would cut off the end of their campaign and cut off their campaign and start reporting on that. And I went and did the analysis, and I found out that they were losing out like 158% of conversions Yeah, it was crazy. And that all comes down to attribution. It's another topic for another day. Attribution and everything like that. But we tend to do the same with testing. We just cut it off. We'll just say, oh, 4 days will do. But if the majority of your purchases or your conversions happen within a 7-day, 10-day, 14-day period, then you should be leaving that test to run for that period if you're using conversions as your success metric. So this is where I'm getting at, right? So you need to understand what period, because they will all, it goes like this, up, 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 and then it will get that little tipping point and then start dropping down. And that dropping down bit, that's the long tail. But we still want to keep this part, and we want to make sure that we've got the majority of the people included in the test, because that's really crucial. And of course, that's going to give us the more robust, more likely to be statistically significant result as well.
And in a similar vein, Kath, we're probably all a little bit guilty of, even when you do run a test, you've probably got a prediction in your own mind of what you think the outcome's going to be. Sometimes you get surprised that the outcome is absolutely unexpected. And, do you come across that? And when you do have those unexpected outcomes, how do you encourage senders to embrace these learnings, especially when they're contradicting conventional wisdom?
Yes. Well, and I think this is one of the reasons why people are fearful of writing a hypothesis, because you usually have to put your foot down and say, okay, I believe. That's how our hypothesis is formed. I believe that loss aversion is going to deliver more clicks than curiosity. And we were wrong. Also, when you're writing the hypothesis, you always say because. Now, the reason why we thought it was because people don't like to miss out. That loss is really, really deep within us. And so we went, okay, so that's going to win against just being curious. But it didn't. Another one, which was an interesting one that I did for a client, and it was based on Chris Voss. He wrote a book, and he's all for, it's a sales book, and he's trying to get the no from the person. So he doesn't want to set them up and get the power of the nod, as in Robert Cialdini's commitment and consistency principle, which is all about trying to get them to say yes, trying to get the foot in the door, trying to say, would you like to get an additional 20% with your campaign? Oh, yeah, of course I would. Yeah. Great, you've got your foot in the door. They're going to pay attention now to what you're saying. Chris says the opposite. And so we had some discussion within the team, and we decided we're going to go with Chris's one. So we were testing both against each other, A versus B. And we wrote in the hypothesis that the no was going to win over the yes because of how Chris Voss had put it. And also one of the team members had also done some previous tests as well and found it to work for them. So I went, okay, let's go and do that. And the power of the nod, Robert Cialdini's commitment and consistency principle won big time. Gave them 17% more uplifts in leads.
Just to be clear, we're talking about Chris Voss, like the FBI agent? Is that the Chris Voss? Oh my gosh. Guys, we are bringing together my two loves today, which are email and true crime. Those results speak for themselves, right? 17%. Like, that's quite a thing. Even if marketers have a holistic testing strategy in place, if they've got their hypothesis, audiences change, behaviors change. Like, a test from 4 years ago wouldn't necessarily produce the same results if it were performed today. So the reality is that learnings from tests have a shelf life, presumably. So kind of a two-part question for you here. How often should marketers be revisiting a specific test or result, I guess, from a test? And then do you have any examples of the same test performing very differently at different times?
If you think about it, we've just had the US elections. What a test that you ran 3 weeks ago could be completely different to one that you run in another 3 weeks. Completely. Because the economy, outside factors like that, we've just had the UK budget in the UK. Again, that will make things change because it's changing the people, their budget, their feelings, their availability to, do things, everything like that. So absolutely, it needs to be tested. But I think my main takeaway for this is understanding all of that you need to be reporting on your tests. You need to write it down, and then you can flag and say, do you know what? This one we need to test in 3 months. We need to test in 6 months, or we can give this one a year. Or if such and such changes or something like that. Assuming that everything goes according to plan, then we can leave it run for another 12 months. So you need to just have that. And you can't do that if you don't have it written down. And that's where I find the big problem is.
I agree. As we start to wrap up today's conversation, sort of a sort of more future-focused question, because I think we all spend some of our time gazing into our crystal balls and trying to predict what the next big thing is going to be in the world of email marketing. Do you have a prediction? And especially through the lens of today's conversation, do you think there's any ways that email marketers can actually use testing to make sure they're ready for whatever it is when it happens?
Do you know what? I'm going to say this, right? I saw testing take off big time with Phrasee because it was a tool. It was done for them. It made life easier. I don't know if I should say this, but I didn't agree with the methodology because it was based on open rates, right? But it made it sexy. So definitely true. That's it. Email marketers love things that make their life easier and sexy. And also, let me tell you, it's so much easier to get buy-in for a sexy AI tool than it is for another body in your office manually creating A/B tests. So I think with the AI tools, testing tools around the corner, absolutely. I do believe that it's going to have, I can't even say renaissance. It's never had the first. It's going to finally see the light of day, shall we say. But again, at the same time, you still need to know the fundamentals. You still need to be, doesn't matter what tool you're using, you still need to be the director of that particular test, and you need to understand it and put everything together and brief your tool and whatnot, right? So it's not just taking everything off your plate. You still need to have that knowledge and experience, I would say. And that then brings into just Gen AI altogether as well. I think it's going to, there's a lot of people who are going, oh no, it's a fad. I don't know. I don't know that it is.
Right. And before I ask the last question, which I promise will be a fun one, you had me thinking with this answer about not only the way that AI is being leveraged by marketers, but now the way that mail clients and mailbox providers are using AI too. Like right before we recorded today, I just got off a call where we were walking through the changes to the native mail app that come with iOS 18, and like marketers aren't writing, not that everybody was testing pre-headers or whatever, but they're not writing, like they're going to create those pre-headers for you. And how do you account for that when you're doing your testing? So it's all going to be, it's definitely not a fad. Not all hype. It's coming.
And it really means that we have to, I've spoken a lot about those new features as well and written about them and everything. And it just really means that we as marketers need to have our finger on the pulse and understand as much as possible and be prepared, be versatile, be flexible, and not be sort of stuck in our ways.
Yeah, I think that, going along with all of the scientific testing that marketers haven't really been trained to do, objectivity, right? Being objective and making sure that you can actually stay on the pulse. Anyway, as we wrap up, Kath, I do have a light question just before we close out the show that I'm hoping you'll give a good one for us because we've been laughing a lot today. So what is the funniest or maybe most bizarre testing variation that you've come across that maybe makes you laugh or maybe makes you cringe? Is it something that marketers are still doing today, or it doesn't really make sense? I just love to hear what your testing horror story sounds like.
Well, I do actually, I still get a lot of emails from past employees because they were helping and everything like that, and they signed up to some really interesting things. So I get them. So often I can see straight away when A/B test is being conducted. And some of them are very, very interesting, including, this is a cringeworthy one. This is literally the same words, just flipped around in different order. And it's a short subject line in the first place. So it's not as though it's an intent. And they're hoping hoping to get a robust response and difference. People need to understand that statistical significance is dependent upon how different the changes are. And which is why a hypothesis is so crucial, because you can say loss aversion versus curiosity versus this word first before this word, and you're not going to get the results. So, yeah, it's a bit cringeworthy, and the problem why it is so cringeworthy is I still see it time and time and time again.
I love the specificity of that answer, honestly, because it ties into what you've been saying this whole time, which is just being actually scientific about the test matters, and one word in front of another may not be that statistically significant. I appreciate it.
So I think we are done for today, Kath. It's been such a pleasure having you on Email After Hours and being so generous, sharing your testing insights. I think it's a fantastic episode and loads of great insights for our audience. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on again.
And if any email nerds out there, any fellow email nerds would like to come on the pod, comment, or just message us on LinkedIn, we would love to chat and get you in the hot seat in the weeks and months to come. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Be sure to tune in next time and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And don't forget to visit senderscore.com for loads more great resources to help you become a stronger sender.
To all you sleepless senders out there, thank you for joining us after hours, and see you next time.